problem I call. It's a mess. And because this is what perhaps they are trying to pitch in.
The Sanskrit term for universal is jati.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is not Panchajati, is not Jati of this. This is Jati. That's what I'm asking you, can you define class and universal once again? Exactly, please translate it, this is Jati. Panchajati is this. And just to draw a parallel, Panchajatis are kind of 3s and 4s and 5s and 7s and 9s. Something very similar, someone also comes up in West. Someone to the eminence of Pythagoreans, their disciples. They speak with something called 5 things of world. World come into reality because of these 5.
So if you just look at this term jati, this itself can be analyzed from multiple directions. Like this word we find in many places, like in music we find jati, in so-called caste system we find jati, what is your jati we say. But technically what is your jati means, it is, jati means birth.
Jata.
Jata, that also, so it does not necessarily mean that
A bloodline or a lineage or...
Yeah.
A class.
Yeah, it can be a class or it can be a birth. Other way around, in music, wherever jatis are there, either they can be a class or they are speaking of birth. This is one thing from which everything is born.
There are ways to read these terms. That's what repeatedly...
Yeah. So from all angles one has to look. That's why any system, before one learns, like Arvindanji said, any Shastra in India you learn before that, first you learn Vyakaran. You have to learn Vyakaran, and particularly if you are doing philosophy, after Vyakaran you have to learn Nyaya. Whichever school you are subscribed to, you can be Advaitin, you can be Visishta Advaitin, you can be Shaiva person, whoever it is, you have to learn Nyaya.
Vyakaran means nomenclature.
Grammar. Panini Shastadhyayini. So minimal, that's a minimal thing, you have to learn Vyakaran so that whenever you are reading any text, be it of any subject, be it of any Shastra.
Why do you think we should learn grammar?
To make sense of these alphabets, no? Or to put them together.
No, wait. Exactly, please can we help us to be a little more there, is that if you're reading dance, what is the alphabet of dance?
Constituents.
No, see what he said is little extract ourselves from this particular instance and little more extent. Reading dance. Look, I'm inducting a child. I'm sending her to knowledge of dance. Leave alone dancer, whatever it is. Now, the first thing he says is learning the grammar. Grammar money, he gave us 3 things, no? 3 constituents of grammar. Alphabet, sentences. No. Can you complete the third thing? Completely. He never said just roots.
No, he said you need guidelines. Make the alphabets into
But they are not light. They are very precise. Rules to make those sentences. In that sense, if we are doing it on dance, can we, the same parlance, can we say what is the grammar of dance? Then there's something called alphabet you will be questioning. There's something called the tendency of sentence you are questioning and laws of making it. Am I right? Then now we will question what is an alphabet? What is that which qualifies to be called an alphabet in any given medium? Any given medium, be it music, be it dance, what qualifies to be called an alphabet? It is not Aramani. It is not, no. It is something beyond it where the grammar texts are speaking. The grammar texts...
The power of thought of that...
No, we can't, we are not clear about this. That is right, all these things are thoughts only. But how formally they are documented. No, why I am saying that, before touching Bharata, these questions have to be first understood before touching the Shastra. Where does this reality come into picture? What is, if we are speaking Bharata's language, where is the grammar? Where is the sentence? How do you make sentence? Is it generally language sets up with subject, object, verb, no? We are playing with that. What is the subject, what is object, what is the verb in his domain? And how do you make rules out of creating sentences in that domain? Don't always get confused with grammar of a language being only of a spoken language. It's not only a spoken language or written language. Grammars are, deeper grammars are there which he is not speaking, which he is aware of. The sense like there are lot of the grammars. Why I am saying that? There is a far more deeper sense in what he is quoting grammar to be. and alphabet construction, and the ideas which we
See, one simple question can be, suppose we know the sentences in dance, say they are movements, some complex movements, many names you will have for some posture or some gesture, whatever it is. Can the alphabets of these movements themselves be movements, or they are something else?
That's a question.
Can you repeat?
The sentences we know in dance, you all know, you are in your memory and everywhere you know at the tip of fingertips. These movements are complex movements, right? Now they are built out of some atoms. Now the question is, since the sentences are movements, are the atoms themselves are also movements, or they are something else? Can you build movements from non-movements, or can you build movements only from movements?
Simply further
It's a
break down,
good
even if you think this is an alphabet, you break it down further.
No, we don't know whether it's an alphabet even. Can you
Yeah.
qualify to call it alphabet?
With what we know, I see that it's subtle to gross.
Yeah.
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 But that.
So what
I
is,
know only that
these words
much
are
I
okay,
can
subtle
say
to gross,
now.
what is subtle? What is gross? No, subtle, is it physical or mental? Can there be a subtlety at physical level also, or subtlety is only in mind or only in language? What is, these terms we know. We have a very subtle notion of words subtle and gross.
Yeah.
We don't have a gross notion of subtle and gross. So we should get more clarity on that. That's the idea.
Will we go into the domain of that Akshara? No, if it is connected to language and.
Yeah, that I will touch in the next session. I mean, I'll touch in a very different way, as a boundary and that kind of thing. But that itself needs a workshop.
That's what I'm saying.
I just had to ask something. I attended an earlier session of yours where you said that reality it was explained through various if you just number 3 then it's Uma, if it's 7 it's the Saptaswaras, if it's 9 and 8 it's the the Ashtaramaikas. So are those classes what you were talking about?
No, I only took it as a very easy example. So deliberation example is okay. But actual ideas are from here. At that particular time I took to express something. But to know that something works like that.
There can be potential alphabets from which systems can be built. Right now, one has not worked on that, or we don't know whether someone worked and they are available to us. They are
The
Saptaswara.
entire idea of Nayaka Nayika also, that day, one example. I think this is a very big thing happened, and I think as dancers we ought to know this. One senior dancer who came, who danced in Triple that one of the days, and the question was asked to her like, she did basically Vasak Sajika. I think all of us are familiar with Vasak Sajika Nayika. So she decked herself and she did Shorashtra, they do 16 alakaras, and they did and one of the questions was, why are you objectifying a woman? Why are you making her an object of speculation? Yes, the thing was like, it was kind of compromised with an apology. The artist felt apologetic for an idea, for women being objectified, but yet the help of a tradition was called for, and the tradition has like this. Perfect, fine. But I would rather say, no, it is okay. In one way, this very honest reply from her, she never minced words. She said what she had to say, and that's what comes to her mind that particular day. So that's fine. But the question is, if you ask this question to all the artists, what would be the reply? But the fact is, we forget that Nayika is not a woman.
Yeah, that's irrelevant to think of it as objective. It is
No,
just
no.
a passing thing.
Nayika is, the popular notion is Nayika is a girl. Nayika is some girl who is getting dressed. It is not a girl, it is not a woman, it is not nothing. It is an entity called Nayika, which Bharata says in this Natya Shastra.
It's a technical term.
It's a technical term. Nayika, are two technical terms. It has nothing to do with you and me. We are only embodying it in our body. There can be a Nayika in painting. There can be a Nayika in color. There can be a Nayika in fabric. There can be a Nayika in raga. The fact is, are we understanding this technical word called Nayaka, Bhav? Bhav is a very different, what exactly he called as Akshar. Akshar needs an entire deliberation, and the other word for Akshar is Bhav. Bhav is not emotion. Bhav is not Sringara Hasya Karuna, no. It is in Bharata school you joined, you got into, as she said, KG to PG into Bharata school. In midway you understand one concept called Bhav. Their Bhav is Naika Naiki Bhav. In that school you joined. And they are trying to explain reality, entire reality through that. If you hit it here, no one would ask you a question, next question. Because it's a technical, why you want to mince words around? It's clearly technical. Naika Bhav, if you join Bharata school, perhaps you'll be able to understand why 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. It's a technical discussion. And Naika has nothing to do with any one woman. Please don't shy off, because most of us feel this day-to-day pinch. Someone is asking this, nowadays it's more in the high. Why should, because no youngster is ready to learn that. I'm sure next generation would object, will be totally against this. One dancer quoted that he felt so difficult to teach a Krishna piece in US. I think that a girl is walking up to say, I don't want to do a piece of womanizer. No, there's nothing wrong about the girl who what he said. She feels the Krishna. Who made the child to perceive Krishna as a womanizer? We only know. Like, he's a rowdy rascal. He's a black god. He runs about, he steals. I don't want to steal anything. Good, fair enough. She's honest. She's honest. But who's to say this? That Krishna has nothing to do with this. Naika is not what you think. Unless and until we are very clearly, I'm saying if the knowledge comes from the other world, that kind of foundational knowledge is clear, this will constantly keep haunting us again and again. Again and again.
Language is a very important thing in any domain, whether it is science or maths, even in arts, whatever terms right now we are discussing, bhav, that comes from the Sanskrit verb called bhavati. Now, one needs to see this connection. You can't just remain within Natyashastra and remain within your own upbringing that, okay, bhavs are all emotions and feelings. You can't translate it so loosely. You can't, that's a very superficial translation. First of all, do we even know what emotion is? Suppose we say emotion. Do we even know how emotions work? Do we even know the difference between emotion and feeling? Do you even know the difference between emotion and thought? Is there an emotion when you are thinking, or is there an emotion when you are imagining? Is there a difference between thinking and imagining? Thinking and memory? We don't know these distinctions, but we use these words left, right and center. And we translate them very easily. That is the problem. We don't take language seriously. Language in any domain, if you are doing something serious, language has to be given that seriousness. And particularly classical languages like Sanskrit or Greek or any of them, they are so rich. Why are they called classical? Not because they are age-old things. Just because something is old, even our grandmother is old. We don't say that classical people. Just because you are old doesn't make you classical. There is something more than that. Classicalness is every word in this language is conceptually rich. You just analyze that word will tell you a lot about its object. You need not look at the object, you just look at the word, analyze the word. It will tell you many things about the object. Some instance which we discussed many times, like there is this example which Professor Navjyoti gives. He says Darvesh is there, where they just keep rotating continuously. That's the only thing they do, entire performance.
That's one dance form and practiced in Iran, where they flowing robes, long. It's called Darvesh.
Yeah. So, yeah. So Professor Navjyoti says that dance form is a way of linking khud to khudai. That is what they are doing. They are not performing for you. They are performing for themselves to link khud to khudai. Now the interesting thing is, you look at this term khudai. It is nothing but a transformation of the word khud. But khudai means for God. But if you look at the word khudai, it is actually telling you something more about God than just God God. If you analyze the word God God, you will not get any information from that word itself. But if you analyze the word khudai, it is actually saying it is like selfness. Right? Khud is oneself, khudai is like selfness.
So in Telugu we say Atma Paramatma.
Those are different words. They will have a different meaning of God again. Paramatma as God will have a different technical definition than Khudai as God. Bhagavan as God has a different meaning. So, I'm giving an example to say classical languages, one of the distinguishing features is the analysis of the words themselves gives you a lot of information about the objects they are pointing to.
Like metadata.
Yeah,
Like it.
yeah, metadata is encoded in the data itself, a lot of it.
Yeah.
Or suppose you take this term called Manushya. Yaska has given an etymological definition for that. Manushya means Kasmat Manushya. He asked Manushya Kasmat. Answer is Matva Karmani Sivyanti. That is Manushya. Which means one who stitches actions after meditation. Meditation, thinking. This is the definition of man, Manushya. Now there can be other definitions. We can say who is man? Aristotle says he is a rational animal. Someone else may say man is a selfish being. Someone else may say man is someone who can imagine. So there are different definitions of human.
Who can think?
Who can think, who can imagine, all these things. But this is one of the definitions which is saying man is someone who does actions after thinking. This is one definition of man. You are capturing man like that. But this is well captured in the word itself. You need not say an elaborate statement, man is someone who does actions after thinking, and then give a separate name called man. The word man says nothing about it. You have to put it in a sentence to say what that word means. But Manushya need not require a sentence. The word itself tells you what that object is.
And it's beautifully said, stitches.
Stitches. So we do stitch every time. There are joints of reality around which we stitch. We keep thinking. There are hundreds of decision making processes happening every second, and we decide what action to do, what action not to do. Even Gita says you cannot never not do an action.
That is also another action. No action
That's what.
also.
So that fits perfectly in this definition. Man is someone who acts after meditation. He has to act. He cannot not act. That is one thing. Another example is say Bhagavan. That is one definition of God. That is describing God in one particular way. Bhagavan actually says it is an entity. Right now we don't know God. Whenever we use this word God, it's already an overloaded term. We get a male anthropomorphic image of God. Someone having a beard, someone having white robe and sitting there. That kind of thing, whatever it is, but that is overloaded. So let's not use anthropomorphic terms. Let's just try to be neutral in the sense it is an entity with some properties. So Bhagavan is an entity which has 6 positive attributes and An means no negative attributes. Bhagava, each of these letters stand for two properties. Ba is Jnana Shakti, Ga is Bala Aishwarya, Va is Virya Tejas. So Bhagavan is any entity which has these 6 qualities and no bad qualities, that is Bhagavan. Now this Bhagavan is very different from Advait Brahman. That is Nirgun. This is Sagun. Now Visishta.
This is exactly why you called Bhagavan Adi Shankara, Bhagavan Ramanuja, Bhagavan Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So Bhagava is you qualify them for those qualities. So just because that God also qualifies this quality is called as Bhagavan. So,
The other one you said is?
Advait.
Nirgun is
Brahman.
Brahman.
Brahman. So you see Visishtadvait people, they say they interpret the Nirgunatva of Brahman in a different way. Advait basically says Nirgun Nirakar. Brahman is Nirgun Nirakar. No gunas, nothing, no attributes, nothing. That is the definition or characteristics of Brahman, who is God and all those things. Visishtadvait says, no. The word Nirgun there is not meaning that he doesn't have any gunas at all. It only means he doesn't have any negative gunas. So he has gunas, but he doesn't have any negative gunas, hence he is Nirgun there in that sense. So the same word is interpreted differently but technically, very technically, and with this different technical interpretation you build an entire system. That is why for Gita you have tens of commentaries. It is based on this Prasthanatrayi, Gita, Upanishads and Brahma Sutras. You got all these schools, Dvait, Advait, Visishtadvait, all these schools are commentaries on the same set of texts. Same Bhagavad Gita, Shankaracharya is interpreting, same Bhagavad Gita, Ramanujacharya is interpreting, same Bhagavad Gita, Madhvacharya is interpreting, but they got entirely different schools from the same text. It's because that language is so dense that you can read various things from that, but it's not an arbitrary reading. you are reading the entire text. If you read one word in a particular way, all other words reading should be aligned with this. If you can do that, then that is a good system. Every system is coherent in itself. You can't just, okay, I will read Bhagavan according to Visishtadvaita, I will read Brahman according to Advaita, I will read Buddhi according to Sankhya. You can't do like that. Every single word you have to read according to one system.
Sorry, 1 minute. This is exactly what it requires us to read Natyashastra. We have lost that technical glossary to read Natyashastra. Let us be quite honest about it. The only available commentary to us is from Kashmir Shaivism School, which is from Abhinav Gupta's. Leftover is written here and there, Sri Shankuka, Bhattalolata, Bhattanayaka, some of them are leftover riffraffs commentaries we have. But the compiled, whatever one commentary we have is Abhinava's. Abhinava lived as late as 10th, close to 10th. Bharata is old. And there are multiple commentators we don't know also who existed. So Natyashastra is totally only from one perspective called Kashmir Shaiva's perspective, what we're currently reading. So that's why exactly this would say that what Bharata's school was, because he refers to two other masters, Adi and Vriddha Bharata, we actually don't know, their texts are not available. So, but their text had to be come from, if at all you are trying to design a complete system to open this Natyashastra, we have to sit, work out certain parameters, then open the text. There are people who have worked with Vaisheshika viewpoint and they worked also. That much we have to say. They have done it, some work has been done. To say this, having this closeness of doing Natyashastra or something, people have also tried to, they would have had some Jain texts and Bauddha texts on Natya. This is inevitable and it was the order. Because why we say this, if not for such a text, Chirapadikaram would have not been possible. Chirapadikaram was written by a Jain monk, you should not forget it. He clearly says Arangetru and Kadadakade, the two main chapters in Chirapadikaram. He clearly deals with the metrics and parameters which goes into enhancing. But the only point is they are not supposed to be read word by word into meaning in Tamil. First, we have to know the glossary meaning, what content the Jains were approaching the idea of Natya, because their idea of Natya would have been far different from Bharata's school. Bet, we can bet it and we can also argue on it. Why? This is exact same thing of idea of Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, same technical things being read in different schools. Something like this also happened in the past. We have to have all these ideas before even approaching a text.
That is the idea
That's
of
what you call it grammar.
Yes, in a way so, because you are developing your own grammar to approach a text. Classical text reading is a method.
It's a reading frame.
It's a frame through which there is a way you are approaching. Bhagavad Gita is common, but in what parameters are going to take on. But that should be, as he rightly pointed, there's a grammar and there's a completeness, there's a logicalness to it. You test all these things threadbare, then take that lens and put onto the text. And then you magnify that and you keep elaborating on it. First, that should be foolproof. Because we don't have that foolproof lens with that to learn Natyashastra, we are groping.
See, that is the idea of sutras. Sutras are like very, encoded capsules. One has to elaborate them to really understand what they are saying, and hence we have commentaries and commentaries over commentaries and so on. We have Panini Sashtadhyay, which is 4,000 sutras, then we have Mahabhashya, which is a commentary on that, then we have further commentaries on Mahabhashya. Any text you take, any philosophical text, even Natyashastra has commentaries, Bhagavad Gita has commentaries. So, whenever we are reading a text, say particularly sutras, both the text itself as well as the commentary itself, any text for it to be called classical, it should have something called Ekavakyata. Ekavakyata, which means it's like entire text can be condensed into one sentence. That is one way of looking at it, or there are multiple ways. Entire text can be condensed into one sentence, that is one way. Other thing is, all these sutras are coming together to weave one single cloth. It's one fabric. You can't have first chapter as one fabric, second chapter as one fabric, and so on.
No, sorry, 1 minute. Why do you think he used the word fabric? It's a very important think fabric is so synonymous with text. It's not metaphorical, it's not poetical.
And sutra we know is also called thread.
Thread.
Thread is also called sutra.
Because the technical term used for a thread and also for a construct an aphorism is exactly same about sutra. The technical term used to denote both is exactly the same. The tendency of a fabric and the tendency of a sutra, what once Navjyoti sir said to us, was amazing. That there's a point you're trying to analyze, and there's a thinker who's from that point, from point A, you're analyzing point B. Then the end, he made a very valid statement. The entire universe bends itself and connects these 2 points of understanding, and that connection established is called a sutra. You find the entire world and universe within that line. It's a very deeper inquiry, this thread of establishment. That thread establishes because of folding. He gives many different terms to it. He calls warping of time. He gives many examples there. The folding is so important. That it's a query of the universe. It's not just you and me. I hope we know that Natyashastra starts with 5 questions. It's starting with questions. It is not a complete Shastra. That's why Shastris, when you say some Shastri, they don't read Natyashastra. Shastris of India, no. They don't read, because they consider Natyashastra not a complete Shastra, because it is a Samvada. It's just a Samvada being documented. But we know it starts with questions. There are a group of people who approach Bharata during the intermediate gap, and they asked some questions. Answers was the Shastra. In that sense, it is a Shastra in that sense. There is sutras, there are threads being connected. That's why in Tamil it's called Nool. A text is called Nool. You know? Nool means thread.
So that ekavakyata has to be maintained. That's the internal coherence of the text. If there are internal contradictions, then that is not a classical text. Or there may be seemingly internal contradictions which are not really contradictions, which commentators would try to resolve. That is why commentaries are written. So that is a system in itself, and that has its own truth. So there is a truth within this system, there is a truth within that system. The internal coherence of that system is its truth. So there can be multiple coherent systems, and each one has its own truth. But when you look from outside, these truths may seem contradicting to each other, which you should not. You should stay within that system and then look at the system. There is a nice statement in a film: if you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. So you should subscribe to one system at least and then judge other systems. If you don't subscribe to any system and you stand outside everything and then say, okay, this is wrong with this is wrong with that, this is wrong with that, what is right with you? Nothing. So even when any text you are reading, any system you are discussing, with all debates, we know there were great debates between 2 schools of philosophy or any 2 ideas of thought, and in every debate the maximal benefit of doubt is given to the other person. Let me try to make your system as coherent as possible given your axioms. In spite of that, I am unable to make it coherent, which means there is some fault at the base itself. There is some fault in your axioms themselves. So this is the problem with your system. There is an internal contradiction. That is the problem. That is a valid objection to that system. You can't just say, no, I don't like this, so you are wrong. That's not an internal objection. It has nothing to do with your liking or disliking.
Sorry, what he says is a valid documented thing in Indian argumentative systems. You document the other man's and give the maximum benefit or doubt to him that he might be right. Only then you don't find inconsistent, then he is wrong. You first itself, you don't put all your cards and say, I am good, I am great, you are nothing. That's a way of arguing. These are not, we don't construct out of nowhere. We are speaking, whatever we are speaking is from the text, documented thing, and they are giving so much of benefit doubt to the other man. When they say Navkar sir vetoed all the Jain monks from Chidambaram, sure, that you would have given maximum benefit of doubt to Jains. When they converted a Jain shrine into a Vaishnava shrine or a Shaiva shrine, the arguments were not initially getting and killing them or something, nothing doing. Maximum benefit of doubt is given to other system, you veto that, you find inconsistency, then you veto that. It's a very, very ethical way of doing. It's very giving all the things.
Also, whenever say when two sides are debating and one of them loses, it does not mean that particular system has lost. It's that particular person has lost in the debate. So just because that person has lost, you cannot veto that this system is wrong.
Yeah.
Someone else who is better than him may defend that system better, who understands the system better may defend. That's a different thing. So debate is always between two people and their understanding of their respective schools. It is not that school itself. Because we as humans, we have our own limitations in understanding whatever schools we subscribe to. It is only with that knowledge I can debate. I can't just be adamant saying that this is right, but I am unable to prove it. No, you don't know the means to prove it, you don't have sufficient knowledge to prove it. So accept that. So that's a different thing. So, but the right way of doing debate is to give maximum benefit of doubt to the other person as well as that system. And then you put forth. It's like, Professor Navjyoti says very nice thing. He says when you are doing a war, it's a very cheap thing to hit at the weak point of the enemy. You should hit at the strongest point. How do you hit at the strongest point? To read that statement or argument with the maximum benefit of doubt to that person. Let's assume you are right. Let's give this, let's give you that. All benefit of doubt I am giving you, but still there is a problem with your thing. If I don't even give the benefit of doubt, I immediately say, no, this doesn't stand, this is weak. That's like hitting at weak point. You are only showing your weakness. You can't argue further if he brings in any other tools from his thing. So, the ekavakyata of the text, the internal coherence of a system, is what is more important than its so-called correspondence with reality. Because first we don't know what reality is, how do we judge whether something is corresponding with that or not? One way to understand what reality is to reflect upon the system which is describing the reality and judge the internal coherence of that system. The more coherent it is, the more real it is.
Many Shastras rather object to the point where Natya not people have some problem in accepting it as a Shastra is that because Natya Shastra is arguing about reality of another world construct on this real world. There's no world like that, no? There's a meta world. Under world reality, within that world, what is the nature of reality? What is water? What is within that world? What is fire? Within that world, what is human being? He is not this human being. Within that world, who is a Brahman? Because anyway there is Jati. Within that world, what is the Jati? This world has one Jati. That's why Natya Shastra becomes a complex text for Shastris, and not just complex, they say I can veto it. Because of the reason, it is not, he is saying that even when you are reading it directly from reality, we don't know reality. Let us have one coherent system, from there to introspect reality. Rather, you are doing a second order moving to Natya Shastra. Natya Shastra makes a second order, Bharata creates another world within a world. It gets twice removed, not even once removed. Henceforth, Natya Shastra is so important and extremely important to make someone eternal. If you want to make someone live long, make a character of them. Don't create the charita, then don't create the history, create the charita. It's a very important tool that if you make a history of a man, he is going to die. If you get a charita of a man, he is going to be eternal. The exact problem, sorry, I'm taking a very mundane example. The film what Uttama Villain Kamala Hassan did. The exact problem, he says, no, I want to live longer, I want to live longer. Man, that's Mrityunjaya. Exact problem is, he says, no, I want to create a film on myself so that I would live longer. There's one comedy dialogue in between saying that I would live longer only when being a poet or who's mad or I'm an actor. In the middle of a film, this dialogue comes. It's very interesting that Natya Shastra is speaking, he is speaking about what he just said is you have a coherent system and you assume I don't know reality, with that I am going to understand reality. Rather, imagine about removing reality furthermore, one more step ahead and creating a world on it. Like Natya Shastra, the world of stage is a world within itself. It has everything concise, time is different, coordinates are very different. Personality used to say that Natya is nothing but architecture of time. It's different times coming together. It's stitching of different times. It's a fantastic formal example in to understand what Natya is about stitching of time. Cinema is about stitching of different times. It's not
So
one.
when you say time, do you mean the other person's world?
No, once again we'll come back to this. What is time? Because time, actually there are formal discussions, at least 14 different levels of times. Actually we know some discussions on it, but there are far more discussions in it. Because time discussion is never taught in Natya. Unless we only do Tada thing. Time discussion is the discussion because so quickly we get into past, so quickly we jump into present, so quickly to future. Where are you toggling? What is current time? Are you making a fool of us? Are you very clear? Are you really sincere? The answers are very sincere. The fact is the work is also very sincere. The only point is they are unable to articulate the technical complexities of time. But time is not going back and forward. Time is there only. Time has a very different dimension. How are you stitching different? Time is not what we think. The exact thing what he said, no? If you ask what the time is, I may say the watch. But the time, we have to ask far more bigger questions.
So, this term for the functional as well as foundational organizational principle of reality, the Greek term for it is arche, from which we get other terms, architecture, archaeology, overarching, archetypes, all these terms, they come from this word arche. So, there are various schools, hundreds of schools which have imagined different kinds of arche for reality, both in the East, in the West, in Middle East, whatever you want to call. Every region has thought of this question, what are the fundamental units of reality out of which this complex reality has come about, and they have given different answers. We'll look at some of them. I don't think I'll be able to finish all of them now. We'll continue after the break also. So right now some 10 minutes are there. I'll just cover a couple of them and we'll take a break. So, like I said, arche, like atoms, you see how many alphabets are there? Some said 0, some said 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 9, 16. There are Sankhya is like 24 in one sense. That is also, they can be considered as arche. There may be many schools which have spoken of 50 atoms. Even say language itself is like, if you take Sanskrit or Telugu, there are 56 alphabets. One can say that is like arche for the entire language itself. If you take Nada Brahman, then that sound itself is like an arche for the entire reality. So there are various imaginations of what arche can be, and different number of arches are imagined by different people as well as different schools of philosophy. So I am giving just some examples. It ranges from 0 to infinity. In between some numbers I am covering, but the entire spectrum has been covered already. We only need to reflect upon them, and even this reflection, many lifetimes are not sufficient. Even if we take one school, to understand it fully, not just one lifetime, many lifetimes are not sufficient. We are only trying to get the landscape of thought, to see how much time man has spent on thinking about this and what are varieties of answers they have come up with. Right now that's what we are looking at. And then we will see some examples linking it with art in the next session. So, one of the, probably the only example which we know as of now of arche being 0, I mean no arche, but reality is there. It's like, this is also called Shunyatavad. Nagarjunacharya, we know the celebrated Buddhist scholar who stayed here near Nagarjun Sagar. He came up with a school called Madhyamika, which is also called Shunyatavad. In fact, this is a very complex thing. First of all, among all philosophical schools in the world, whatever variety are there, almost all those varieties can be found in India itself. And within Indian schools, almost all those varieties can be found within Buddhism itself. So Buddhism itself further divided into so many sects. There is a realist school of Buddhism, there is an idealist school, there is a Shunyatavad school. There are many schools of Buddhism who explain reality very differently. Every school is very different from the other school. And this is one school, it is one of the most complex. Actually, Buddhist philosophy is probably the most complex philosophy, most counterintuitive and complex to understand in all philosophies, Western, Eastern, all those things. And again, within Buddhism, this is the most complex philosophy to understand. How did something come out of nothing? That's a very complex question. So, it's as complex as the concept of zero. What is zero? When you put an additional zero, how does it get a non-zero value? Value increases, right? Zeros are so important. You can't just say, okay, I only remove zeros, you take this check. You can't say, give me zeros. You'll say, give me zeros. You can't say zeros have no value. No, they have. But how zero adds a value, we have no idea. Zero is so enigmatic concept. What is zero? Even numerically as a number, it's such a complex thing. And imagine one is building a philosophical system on zero. Mind-boggling. So, we'll come back to this a little later because it is very complex. It's easier to understand 1, 2, 3. These numbers are more easier than 0. So, I'll just touch upon these, and after covering all these, we'll come back to 0. Now, there are schools which consider there is only one arcade. Now, when they say one arcade, again this needs to be read very specifically. What do they mean by one? Do they mean that there is only one type of arcade, or do they mean that there is only one particular arcade? Suppose I say there is only one being in this world, that is human. It may mean there are only human beings but many humans, or it may mean there is only one human being. So this is the difference between type and token. Is there one type of thing, or is there not only one type but only one instance of that type? Only one. So given these two differences, there are these schools which say there is one type of arcade but many instances of that arcade. So type is one but tokens are many. It's like we give tokens, no? All tokens are of same type but number of tokens are many. We are all carrying same type of token, but if my token is destroyed, yours will not be destroyed because yours is a different instance. It has independent existence. It's a different number. But all of them are of same type. That's the idea. So Democritus is the first one who comes to our mind when we discuss this arcade being one. He said atoms are the fundamental organizational principle of universe. It is atoms which come together. Like it's very close to modern science. In fact, even scientists, whenever they speak of history of science, they sort of say, okay, the idea of atoms existed in Greek philosophy in ancient Greek times. Democritus was the first one who spoke of atoms. His idea was that everything is made up of atoms. Material, non-material, mental, all aspects are made up of atoms only. When we die, our body and our soul disintegrates into atoms, and again when we are born, they are built out of atoms. But he spoke of only one kind of atoms. They are not like atoms of chemistry where we have...
130.
Acha, food has come?
130.
Okay, fine. So, he is speaking of one kind of atoms, unlike chemistry where we speak different kinds of atoms, oxygen, hydrogen, carbon, all these things. But he spoke of only one kind. So he said atoms are differing only in quantity but not quality. And atoms differ only in degree. They are of different sizes and different shapes. He said some atoms have hooks so that they can hang on to each other. Some atoms have teeth, like gears have teeth so that they can fit onto each other. That's how atoms come together to form wholes. I mean, that's a simple childlike imagination, right? It's like Lego blocks. You have different blocks and you can construct a nice house with that. Blocks are of different shapes and sizes, but they are all of plastic. That's it. It's as simple as that. So he considered entire world to be built out of something called atoms, and atoms are only of one type, so they are qualitatively one but quantitatively many. That is what his theory was. Then there was Thales. Actually, Thales was before Democritus. In fact, Thales is considered to be the father of philosophy. Now, the next question would be, father of which philosophy? Western philosophy, Indian philosophy, what do we mean? And how can someone be father of philosophy? You see, whenever someone says someone is father of something, or someone is the first person to do that, we need to understand that that person is the first, it can be first philosopher, first king, whatever it is, that person is the first so and so in the documented history. There is something called history and there is something called prehistory. Prehistory is where no documentation is available. History is something where documentation started. From that point of time, documentation is available. Now, that timeline may be different for different regions. The prehistoric period for India may be different from Greece, or it may be different from Iran, it may be different from America. So, given the whatever documentation is available to the Westerners, within their documentation, he was the first philosopher. In one sense, since it is a Western history, one can say among Western philosophers, he is the first one. Now, why is he considered a first philosopher? Is it that he was the only person who thought of reality? Till then, no one thought? Not like that. He was the first person who sort of made a shift from supernatural explanation to natural explanation of reality. Till then, people, there was a kind of mythical thinking that there are some anthropomorphic gods sitting up there, and when it thunders, Zeus was angry, or when it rains, gods are crying. You know, these kind of imaginations they have. So they pray to gods, they believe gods are ordering the world. So there is a belief of some supernatural force which is ordering this world and which is the functional principle of this world. Thales made a shift. He tried to find the arche in perceptible realm, not in imperceptible realm. And that, he said, is water. But this water, we should not think of as just water we drink or something like that. This is a more extended notion of water, more general notion of water. It's more than the water we drink, not just the physical water. He has a logic for that. The logic is, there are some axioms. His idea is, motion is a defining characteristic of life. And everything is living because it either moves or it causes motion of something else. And all living things come from some sperm, and all sperms are moist by nature, which means everything comes from water. Moisture is water, na? It is that water he is speaking of. So in that sense, everything springs out of water, and water is the arche. Everything is living because everything causes motion or it moves itself. But all living things come from sperm, and sperms are moist. So everything comes from water. So water is the arche. So this is one imagination. You see, the simple thing is, the same reality is available to all of us. But few of us think or look at it very differently. He is someone who looked at it very differently than his predecessors. In that sense, he is considered to be the first philosopher. So here water is like one type. It is from one type of thing, that which is moist. All things are coming, but there are many instances of that type in the world, and all multiple things come from that type of thing called water. Then we have, in Indian tradition, all of you might have heard this name, Charvak. And Charvak school is considered to be a Gnostic school. In Indian tradition, whenever we say Astic and Gnostic, it has nothing to do with the English words theist and atheist. They are very bad translations, they are wrong translations. Theism and atheism are definitively linked to an idea called God. But Astic and Gnostic are not linked to the idea called God, they are linked to the idea of existence. Asti, na asti. Exists and does not exist. That is what differentiates here Astic and Gnostic. It is not God. So then what is Astic, Gnostic here? There are two readings. One is, Astic schools are those which consider the authority of Veda, which accept the authority of Veda, those which subscribe to Vedic authority, Veda as a Praman, those are Astic schools. All others are Gnostic. According to this definition, there are three Gnostic schools, Charvak, Buddhism and Jainism. All others, most of them we know, are all Astic schools. They accept the authority of Veda Praman. Whatever it is, Sankhya, Yoga, Dvait, Vishishtadvait, all these things, they accept Vedas. Another definition of Astic Gnostic is there. That is, those which accept the existence of soul and those which don't accept the existence of soul. According to this definition, there are only two Gnostic schools, Charvak and Bauddha, because Jains accept a soul. So they will also come under Astic schools then.
Can you please repeat this again?
There are two definitions of Astic Gnostic. One is those which accept the Veda Pramana, those which don't accept. According to this definition, three schools are Gnostic: Charvak, Bauddha and Jain. Another definition of Astic Gnostic is Asti, soul exists or not. Those which accept the existence of soul, those are Astic. Those which don't accept the existence of soul, those are Gnostic. According to this definition, only two are Gnostic: Charvak and Bauddha. Jain is Astic because they accept soul. So Charvak people, they considered only matter to be the arcade, because they have a kind of an epistemology in the sense Praman Shastra. I mean, we need not get into these details. It's like means of knowledge. We have different means of knowledge. How do we get knowledge about the world? We get through our sense organs, or we read some books, or we hear from others, or